everybody, and welcome back to your second episode of the week of Church is Stupid.
Come a butt.
For all of us here, I am Andy.
I'm Ruth.
And joining us again today is our special guest.
I'm Sarah.
And if you want to learn a little bit more about who she is, why she's here, that's in the first episode of the week. Just to give a quick synopsis, if you want to, about yourself.
Oh, yeah, sure. I am a social worker and a cat mom to my two cats. Shout out to Lucy and Louie, who still are listening, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, very much so.
They are listening.
The question is, do cats use in-ear earbuds or over-ear?
Over the ears.
Okay.
Oh, wow. There wasn't even like a moment's hesitation on that one. It was just, yeah, duh.
Exactly.
I feel dumb for not knowing that now.
Well, that's another topic for another time.
Yes,
completely.
yes. So as we discussed in the first week episode, we just would like to remind everyone that during this podcast, we're going to be talking about some heavy topics, including trauma and traumatic experiences. So if that's going to be triggering for you, consider not listening or just take caution while listening to this week's podcast, because we will be discussing some very heavy topics. So I just want to put that out there again, let you know. As we talked about last week, we are going to be continuing our conversation about the church and how the church deals with trauma and traumatic experiences. Last week, we really touched on, or last episode, we touched on how the church deals with trauma. And this week, or this episode, I always say week. It always feels like week. But it's only 2 days.
It feels like week, but it's... Yeah.
We're going to be talking more about how the church has actually been active in traumatizing people. And I think this is a very, very, very important topic, because there are a lot of people who've been hurt by the church, who have left the church because of a traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't stem from something they experienced outside of the church that they just happen to deal with poorly, but it stems from things caused by the institution of the church. And it's heartbreaking for me as a pastor to think of some of the things that have happened to people who've come to church really seeking refuge, seeking a safe place. You know, we want to be a place that's open to all people, that everyone feels the love of Christ coming into, and to instead be met with some of the awful things the church has done is just devastating. And so, Sarah, I'm going to hand that one over to you again, and just what do you think are some of the biggest traumas that are caused by the church?
I guess some of the biggest traumas caused by the church, I guess more so some of the biggest people groups that have been traumatized by the church. You know, I think about the LGBTQ community, you know, women who have had abortions, you know, people who are, you know, just a little different, people who have mental health problems, you know, just the way that the church approaches those groups or those people is in and of itself traumatic and traumatizing, you know, to think about, you know, for those people to, you know, be going to somewhere where they, you know, are told, you know, this is an open place, you know, God loves everybody. But then they get there and it's like, oh, you've done this, or you're this, or X, Y, and Z. Well, God doesn't love you as much as he loves me.
Yep. And again, we know these are very sensitive issues, but these are topics that the church shies away from talking about a lot. They sweep it under the rug. And here at Church is Stupid, we really want to emphasize the fact that we need to be open about the harms that we have caused. We need to address them and talk about them. And what does it mean to move forward looking at all of the hurts that we have caused? Yeah. And in particular, I think of there have been many Christian protests, especially in regards to LGBTQ plus community. If you think about the signs. Do you remember growing up and seeing some of the protests and the signs that would say God hates, slurs that I'm not going to
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
to use? And imagine being like a 12-year-old kid trying to figure yourself out at that time and
Yeah.
seeing that, and to think God, who is this supposed to love everybody, every single person in the world is so loved except you
Yeah.
because of something you can't control.
Yeah, that's very, very, very traumatizing, especially for, younger people who are going through that, who are just, they're in such an impressionable stage in their
Mhm.
life where what they hear, what they see, what they read is going to affect the way that they look at themselves for the rest of their lives. And it's very, very sad.
Well, and I think of how many times that I myself have had conversations with people who have struggled
Mm-hmm.
with their sexuality, with their gender identity, with multiple things like that, who have come to me and told me that they are terrified to tell their parents because of this. And I'm sorry, I know that I get like worked up about this
Mhm.
because how horrible and how traumatizing it is. Because there are people who kick their kids out.
Yeah.
There are people who completely shun their children because of this. And I want to think that that's not common. But I think, unfortunately, it's more common than we want to admit.
Yeah. I've had a couple people I've known who have gotten kicked out of their families because they've come out of the closet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of the hardest conversations I've had with people is the ones who come and talk to me about coming out of the closet, being a part of the LGBTQ, gender identity issues, gender dysmorphia, and they just say, I just hate myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm this way and I hate myself. And it's, were taught, unfortunately, to hate themselves
Mm-hmm.
because of that. And it's not fair for the 17-year-old kid to come and say, I hate myself because of this.
Well, and it's not fair for anybody.
No, it's not fair.
And it's not scriptural
No.
at all. That's not the message that the church should be giving
No.
in any way, shape, or form. And it's so unfortunate. I mean, you deal with it much more intimately
Mhm.
than I have, but especially college, I think, was the time and that's when a lot of people figure it out. And that's when I dealt with this the most,
Mhm.
when I was around other people at college who were dealing with their own identities. And some of them, their families were very accepting, and it was just a fear, and others were not.
Yeah, it's, preface this, I did go to Christian college, so.
As did I.
So the way that we would have those conversations about gender identity were a lot
Mhm.
different than what you would probably experience if you had gone to a public school where it's not ingrained in you as much as you are at your Christian school.
Well, and I think the thing that made me the most upset on this issue particularly was that the college that I had attended, you were not allowed to speak publicly in favor of LGBTQ plus in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
or you would get in trouble. So we could never have like a debate even between what's going on. It was not allowed.
Yeah.
There was you did not talk about it.
Yeah, thankfully my college was a little better than that. They were open to having those conversations. It still wasn't necessarily the right conversations that needed to be had, but they were willing to at least talk about it and approach the topic, and they did get a little bit better as I progressed through college. It's still not perfect in any way, shape, or form, and there's still a lot of people, I'm sure, who go to my college, your college, who come out of it hurt.
Yeah.
Because of that.
And again, we're not saying this is every church. We're
Yeah.
not saying this is every college. We're not saying
Mhm.
this is every Christian by any means. We're talking very much about very specific
Yeah.
situations. But it is an issue that we need to own up and be talking about in the church, and be talking about with the respect that it deserves. That these it's not just an arbitrary issue,
Yeah.
which is how I think it's addressed. It's just an issue that other people deal with. We don't treat it like it's a personal issue. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like as an institution.
Yeah.
When we discuss anything involving LGBTQ plus rights, we talk about, it's almost like other. You know, like, oh,
This and they.
yes.
Are this and us?
Instead of taking time to acknowledge the hurt and the trauma that we're going through by even having some of the conversations that we have.
Yeah, and it's okay to have differing opinions regarding this topic, but it's not okay to make others feel bad for their opinions or for the way that they are.
Mm-hmm. It's never scriptural to hate.
No.
It is never scriptural to say that God hates anything in that wheelhouse is absolutely not scriptural, and that is not Christ. I have to put that out there because I
Yeah.
think there is a line. I think
Yeah.
there is absolutely a line where it's not just differing opinions, where it's actually hate.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry.
I think one of the reasons that like this topic in particular, LGBTQ issues and all that kind of thing, just come to mind the easiest is like with society being way more accepting towards those individuals who are identifying as I'm not going to go through the list of all of them, but
Yeah.
gay, lesbian, bisexual, ... continue.
Yes.
There's a long
Yep.
list. I love you all. Society is calling out the church a lot more for calling out those individuals or for hating towards them because as a society, we're growing more accepting towards these people of like you can be who you are, you can identify how you identify,
Yeah.
and we're going to still accept you as people. But for some reason, the church draws lines as who's a person and who's not a person.
Yeah. I
And
think-
it's, again, not this whole idea of every church draws the line,
Yeah.
but especially in the United Methodist Church in the past couple of years, we've started this conversation of allowing gay marriages inside the church, and we've seen stark lines drawn and the threatening of the splitting of a church and the idea that you have even half of it, I guess this is to me it's astounding that we have half of the church that's willing to split away and form a new church to support the LGBTQ community is just awesome to see, because I never thought, with being raised how I have been in the church, and this is no diss towards my mother or any of them at all, just other individuals, that we would ever see the point where the United Methodist Church in particular is supporting towards those individuals.
Well, and I think the point in which it gets really, really bad is when, as you had indicated, where we're arguing humanity,
Yeah.
where the argument isn't, at any time, and the church doesn't just do this with that particular issue. Another one is teenage pregnancy or any unwed pregnancy, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And I feel like, again, society has become a lot more accepting of having children outside of marriage. Maybe not like teen pregnancy necessarily, but having
There's an entire TV series about
There
that.
is
that is true.
multiple TV series.
One
actually.
of them was filmed in our hometown, so that's another story for another day. But anyhow, the church doesn't really know how to deal with that, but particularly with the girl, not with the guy. It doesn't really seem to be an issue, but there's something about the fact that, like, I feel like it's because it can physically be seen.
Yeah.
Because there's physical evidence that it occurred. It's just the woman in the situation or the girl in the situation becomes such a pariah in the church. And again, it's not all. There are some churches that have stepped up and really helped in that situation. But again, that's traumatizing. When you have a young girl who ends up pregnant and they walk into a church and they look at your finger to see where the wedding ring is, and if it's not there, and that happened to me. So when I was pregnant, as one knows, when you get pregnant, things tend to swell. And my rings didn't fit anymore because, yeah, that wasn't happening. And I wasn't squeezing them on. I didn't care. But, like, when I would go grocery shopping and I wasn't wearing my rings, I would get a lot of interesting looks, sometimes conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, who are you? I don't know you. I'm actually married, first off. And second off, even if I wasn't, please walk away now. And it's one of the things I hated most about pregnancy was that everybody felt the need to comment about my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can see it, so they feel the need to say something. Some were really kind, and some were not.
Yeah. And I think, like, particularly with teen pregnancy, a lot of teens who get pregnant are already kind of being shunned by their peers.
Mm-hmm.
They're being, not all parents do that, but sometimes, their parents aren't always the most supportive, or just family in general.
Mm-hmm.
The person that got them pregnant, like, they're already being shunned by a lot of other people. So then to come to this, church where, again, you're taught everyone
Is accepted and
is
loved.
accepted and loved, and you get there and they're like, again, everyone is accepted and loved, but maybe not you. And you're in a really vulnerable place when you're pregnant, and then you're in being 16 and pregnant. I mean, I can't imagine how vulnerable and how scared you have to be, and to not be able to get any help from anybody.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up another really hot button issue. And again, I apologize for those of you who don't like talking about these heavy topics and how they relate to the church, but quite frankly, we need to. We need to be talking about these things. And that's abortion.
Yeah.
There are, as much as the church, particularly evangelical church, stands out against abortion, a lot of young women have abortions because they're afraid of the repercussions of being pregnant from the church.
Yeah.
I know people in my life who have had abortions for the sake of, my parents would never accept this because they're Christian and I'm not married.
Yeah.
And so either way, they're in trouble.
Yeah,
Either way, they're told you're not enough repeatedly and repeatedly, and we don't handle those issues. And going through an abortion
is traumatizing.
It's traumatizing.
Traumatizing.
And if you can't talk about it with anybody,
yeah,
that makes it even, again, we talked about repression last episode. It's not good.
Mm-mm. And it's, and I think of those people who go off and have abortions and they're by themselves.
Yeah.
And they have to take care of themselves after they have one, and they don't have anybody there. That is a really hard thing to go through, and to not have support after that, is not good for that person's mental state and for their own emotional health, even their physical health, because having an abortion has a physical toll on your body.
So I'm gonna play the bad guy for a minute, and it's okay for hate to come in my direction.
Because you're a man, it's fine.
We're gonna have a conversation out of this with HR, but especially when it comes to Christianity, in order to live your life as a proper Christian, you're supposed to follow the rules that are laid out for you in the Bible, which that gives not a clear definition, but gives some definition as to what Christianity sees as sin. And some of those items that are in there are laying with another man as a man, or premarital intercourse, or different things like that. So
It actually says adultery.
I was giving it in
Sorry. Just wanted to be clear that it actually says adultery. It doesn't actually say... Okay, sorry, continue.
not the point that I'm trying to make.
I know, I apologize.
How can you call something a sin and still accept a person? I guess that's my question, and that's more directed towards you, Ruth.
Yes, yes.
I guess I'm looking for the pastoral answer, but not the pastoral answer, if that makes sense.
So I'll share this. in my life, I have known, as I said, I have known, and I will not share, obviously, story, but I have had people who waited to tell me about it. And then when they did, they said, please don't be mad at me.
Mhm.
And my heart shattered into a million pieces because I was like, you don't need me to be, you made a choice. You need me to be there to love and support you. You know, I believe very strongly in the powers of the Holy Spirit. And if we believe what Scripture says, the Holy Spirit convicts. And if we look at what the church does, we love. That's what the church does. So if someone comes to me and asks me beforehand what my opinion is, I will share my opinion. However, after something's already done, what does my opinion matter at the end of the day? They already know. You know, they already know. They don't need to be met with that. They need to be met with love.
Mhm.
They don't need to be met with shame. Because we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and we need to stop pretending like we haven't and like we aren't actively still doing it. We are called to live a very specific life, and that's very important. And I think it's important to encourage one another to live in a Christian walk. But I also think it's important to know those lines, to know the point at which you are close enough with a person that you have a right to speak into their life and that they are able to hear it, you know? And I think after somebody's already, for instance, had an abortion, is not the time to say, ooh, you know, ooh, well, how is that? I mean, honestly, sometimes to me, the pastoral response is just as easy as being human. It's seeing that someone is hurt, they're broken, and they just need someone to be there for them. It's as easy as that. And I know it's not really as easy as that, but quite frankly, we just need to be human. Because Christ had empathy on all the people he encountered who were sinners. You know, I mean, we look at one of the most prominent examples in Mary Magdalene, who was highly regarded as a prostitute. And how did Jesus respond to Mary Magdalene? Was it shame on you, you nasty whatever? Or was it you already know and you are here in my presence and I love you? It's also encouragement to, you know, live a life that is what God desires. But God didn't make those rules so that way we could beat other people down with them. Those were made to help us live the best possible life, to help us and to help us help others do the same. You know, if you think about all of the commandments, ultimately they harm someone else, don't they? Look at adultery. Okay, if I were to go cheat on Elijah, I won't. I love Elijah. You're the bomb. You're not here today, but I still love you. If I were to go do that, that would hurt him immensely. If he were to cheat on me, it would hurt me immensely because that's harmful to our relationship. If I were to go murder someone, that's harmful. If I lie to somebody, that's harmful. I mean, I'm not talking about the, like, nice ones where it's like, oh, how do I look in this dress? You know, sometimes you're like, dude, you need a boost. You looking great. You know, like me, if I ever ask you that question, you automatically say, what? No, actually, I really want to know because sometimes I pick horrible outfits 90% of the time. Anyhow, there's a reason this is not a video podcast. But they weren't made so that way someone else could come along and remind you how terrible you were. They were made because we want, and God wants, all of us to live the best possible life in relationship with God. And I think that's the way we need to approach these things, is look at them as laws of love instead of looking them at laws of laws. I don't know how better to word that. But that's the difference. You know, a teenage girl gets pregnant. It already happened. As Sarah indicated, they're already going through. a lot. At that point, do they really need somebody to look at them and tell them that they messed up? Or do they need somebody to look at them and say, I will support you
Mhm.
and I will be there for you? And I think that's the reality the church needs to face. And there are people again, I've emphasized this a million times. You are not everybody's accountability partner. You do not have a right to speak into everybody's life about what is right and what is wrong for them. And it is arrogant and it is ignorant to think you are. Trust God, trust the Holy Spirit, and trust that there is somebody who is in that position. You know, that's why I shared somebody who comes to me before. If someone was to come to me like, oh yeah, I really am interested in murdering someone, I'd be like, yo, don't do that. And then I call the cops.
Extreme example, but yes, I understand.
But we're still called to go to prisons, aren't we?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And we're never going to look at the person and say, what you did was right. That's not what you do.
I didn't know we were going, and I'm glad that's where it ended.
This is a
What you
really
did
extreme
was
example.
Right.
No, we're not going to say.
I know.
But like, in the same regard, you know, sorry for the really extreme example on that one, but I just think we really just need to be supportive
Mhm.
of one another a lot more. And Sarah, just and you're quick. I know I took up like 90% of that, and I apologize, but I'm very passionate about this. What has worked better in your experience? Is it support and love when going through these things, or is it being told and reminded that you did something wrong?
Definitely support and love. You know, that's, like you said, if someone comes to you and it's already happened, your shaming of them or being like, oh, you done messed up, is not going to change that. You can't change the past unless you build a time machine, which hasn't happened yet.
Man, that's what I was supposed to do today.
But you can, choose how you move forward from that point with that person, and how you approach them as you move forward, and how you help them as you move forward. Because you cannot change their past actions, but you can, potentially have the power to change the course of their future as they move forward. And being shamed is not going to help anybody.
Yeah.
And, it might make you feel better for, a little bit that you got your spiel in there, but, in the long run, it's not going to help you, and it's not going to help the other person.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important, again, as a church, that we recognize these are things we have actively done to people.
Yeah, and again, prefaces, we're not saying this about everybody and every Christian, every church, every, it's not everybody is like that.
But hopefully this broadens the understanding for people who, one of the things I get met with a lot, and this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode, so my apologies, but I think this is really important. People who are hurt by the church get told, and I want you to know, I've been spending a lot of time researching what the church has done to hurt people. And when I looked up specific, how has the church hurt you, because I wanted to find like blog posts or things like that, I was met with 25 articles from 25 different churches basically saying, if you've been hurt by the church, get over it. When you look at somebody who has been traumatized by the church, who has gone through things like this that have shaped their whole life, and you tell them, just get over it, we're not like that, your words are meaningless. Because they've already experienced something that's shown that your words aren't true. And sometimes you have to meet people where they're at and show them that you're not different. It's not going to be an instant, or that you're not the same, sorry. You want to show them you're not the same, not the wow, that was an odd wording. But it can be, when we say things like that, when we're not aware that there's an issue, it's easy for us to disregard people from, and And again, Andy, I think, and Sarah, since you are both relatively around my age, shut up, Andy. Anyhow, we all have stories of friends, yes, who have had an experience that was not just bad, but was quite frankly traumatizing in a church.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So when you look at our generation and you say, people, why aren't you coming to church?
Not surprised.
It's not surprising because even if it didn't happen to me, it happened to somebody I knew. And to just say get over it without putting any work in is not, I mean, it just is so hollow. So that's why we wanted to talk about this today, because we want to talk about how by acknowledging that the church has taken part in these things, we can maybe move forward into understanding that just saying get over it or just being mad that people our age are not coming to church, looking at the problems and saying, okay, how can we fix this? How can we move forward? How can we actually help people who are dealing with trauma? And I know, again, we're over time, but I really, really think we need to take some time. And Sarah, what are ways the church can actively be seeking to not traumatize other people?
I mean, I think you kind of touched on a little bit is, I think the first thing that the church has to be willing to do is acknowledge that they have caused trauma already. Like, just being willing to say, like, yeah, we messed up. We have caused trauma. And that's, a whole basket of things that needs to be unpacked. But I think that they're not going to be able to move forward until they have acknowledged the fact that it has happened. It's a hard thing for them to acknowledge because, church is, where they preach love everybody, and it's hard for anyone to admit, oh, I haven't actually done that, as a church or as an institution, any sort of Christian organization, just being willing to say, yeah, I've done that. And, that I think that's got to be the first step, is just acknowledging that. And
Absolutely.
Again, I know that's a really hard thing to do because no one likes to admit when they've done something wrong. But the only way you can move forward from doing something wrong is to admit it and be like, how do I learn from that? And I think the second point is being willing to have those conversations with people, just being willing to listen to them and ask them questions and, being willing to listen to them and say, what has been your experience as an LGBTQ person in the church? What has been your experience as someone who was pregnant as a teen? What's been your experience as blah, 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 all the other various things. Just being willing to have those conversations with those groups and with those people, which is going to be uncomfortable and awkward because, again, no one likes to hear how they've done things wrong or how they've hurt people, but you got to learn, what is it that I'm saying? What is it I'm doing that's actually harmful? Because if you don't think you've been harmful, then you're not going to change. If you don't know what you're doing that's harmful is harmful, then you're not going to change. Like even me as a social worker, when I work with clients, I always tell them, if I say something that's hurtful or that you don't like, please tell me, because I'm not perfect. Yep. I'm going to say things that are going to make you upset, and I just want you to be willing to tell me. Because if you don't tell me, I'm probably going to keep doing that thing because I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware that it's hurting you.
And if you had a 1-minute summary of what it could look like, a church that truly doesn't traumatize others, what would that be?
Oh, I don't know.
That's okay. If you don't, that's fine.
I mean, I think it would just be just a place where people feel safe.
Yeah.
Just a safe space. I think that's ultimately what it would look like, is just feeling safe and feeling loved, and knowing that, when you go to that place, that you're not going to leave that place feeling hurt,
being harmed,
beaten down, or ashamed, but that you're going to leave that place feeling loved and supported, and I'm not saying that you have to agree. Again, you don't have to agree with everything, but you have, you got to be loving towards everybody because we all sin. Some sins are just a little bit more out there than others, and it's easy to beat down the people that you can see their sins. But for the people that you don't see the way that they sin, it's a little harder to
and it gets
acknowledge them.
even more murky when it's traumas that are induced by other people's sins and not their own. But
We are
yes,
out of
we are
time.
way
We
out of
over.
time. But I did want to, mention that as we're talking about trauma, we are not necessarily specifically saying that trauma is caused by people who have done something wrong. Much trauma is not. There's a lot of things that can cause trauma.
Unintentional trauma.
Yes. So sorry, I just wanted to clarify that because it did sound like we spent a lot of time talking about. Yeah. So,
Yep.
Okay.
So we are very much so out of time today.
Yes.
And I want to thank you all for sticking with us for the few extra minutes that we took just to look at some other ideas. For all of us here at Church is Stupid,
Comma but.
I'm Andy.
I'm Ruth.
And I thank you again for joining us, our special guest.
I'm Sarah.
And we hope that you enjoy your day and experience loving your neighbor as you love yourself.